Stalin is a man who most people associate with the Soviet Union, communism, or Russia, the longest-serving leader of the USSR from 1924 until his death in 1953. A Soviet revolutionary and politician ruling with his iron grip. Known as Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, little do people know he was born as Joseph Vissarionovich Zayugashvili. Just as not many people would know that he came from Georgia, and specifically from a small city surrounded by mountains which used to be an important military stronghold during the Middle Ages. Its name is Gori, and it sits an hour west of Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. This is the birthplace of Stalin, who's also ethnically Georgian. Everywhere across the world, history does not speak in favor of the man. But there is a strange sense of pride. The locals say that such a big man came from such a small place after all. The museum that was erected in his honor around the house in which he was born. I'm here on a day trip to explore it and the other noteworthy points of interest in a small city full of surprises. As I was staying in Tbilisi, I traveled to Gori for a day trip. At the Dubai railway station, you can find a parking lot with marshrutka vans or regular cars going to various cities. I found a car that took me to Gori for 7 lari, which is only €2.41 for an hour drive. I have to say it wasn't the safest as the seatbelts weren't functioning. Nor is Georgia known for very safe driving, sometimes as the driver sped quite a bit. But nonetheless, for a small price I arrived in the middle of the city center of Gori. Gori is not a big sprawling metropolis like Tbilisi, but after I had arrived I was still able to find a simple vegan meal. Outside in the city you will also find some people that sell Stalin souvenirs at the back of the museum.
And right now just having some simple mushroom soup. I was going to order something better, but I just have soup and bread because this place seems to have like a power outage, so they can't cook a lot. Okay, so I just arrived in Gori and now I am in Stalin's birthplace. The car ride was kind of crazy because it wasn't really that safe. There were 2 back rows and I was on the very last back row and there were no seat belts, which was bloody insane basically. And yeah, they have a bunch of Stalin magnets already, and the driver dropped me off right exactly at the Stalin Museum. There was a restaurant, but they had a power outage, so I could only really order like mushroom soup, which was of course samaho or vegan. And now I'm going to check out this city.
It is time to visit the museum for which I came to Gori to begin with, the Stalin Museum. Visiting the museum costs 15 lari or €5. This will include the actual museum, the train carriage outside that Stalin used for transportation, and a little house where he was born, shielded by a dome. The permanent exposition shows you Stalin's activities before and during the revolution. Then you go into a second hall to show you the period where his party fought for economic and cultural development of the country. The third hall documents the Second World War. The fourth hall shows about his death. The subsequent halls have his gifts and personal items displayed, with also another separate room that is devoted during the period of repressions. But I believe I didn't end up filming the last one. The tour has a surreal feel of feeling like he's being revered, perhaps because he was such a big man that came from a small town after all. Outside you will find the green train carriages that are now property of the museum. This was Stalin's mode of transport to visit all of the former USSR. He was not a big fan of flying, so he only took to plane when he had to. Like for example in 1943 when he attended the Tehran conference in Iran. He first made his way over to Baku, Azerbaijan, Georgia's neighbor, before flying the remainder of the distance by plane. His train carriage was no different to regular railroad cars, except that it had armored walls and floors. It weighed 80 tons instead of 60 because of that. Here you can see the inside of the train. After the train, we make our way to the front of the museum, where we find the house where he was born. He was born to Bessarion Yugashvili, a shoemaker who was born into a Georgian family of serfs. Although originally from close to Tbilisi, he was invited to Gori to manufacture shoes for the Russian soldiers garrisoned there. There he also met Stalin's mother Ekaterina Galadze, and they had 3 children, the future Soviet leader being their only surviving child. Here they still preserve his house under the dome for visitors to view. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to enter though.
And this is all part of Stalin's Park, which is right in front of the museum, and the house, which is over there in the distance, where Stalin was born. And so I went to the Stalin Museum, as you could see in the video, and behind me they actually kept the original house of Stalin intact and built a dome over it. So you can actually see the original place where he was born. And it's right here in Gori, Georgia.
Now I was wandering throughout the streets. I found my way to the foot of the Gori fortress or Gori Tsike. This is the medieval citadel overlooking the city. It was a fortress of major strategic importance with its dominant position guarding the regional trade routes. Nowadays you can climb up for free and enjoy the view over this small city and admire the snowy peaks of the mountains in the distance.
So right now I'm climbing up to the fortress of Gori, and surely when you're in Georgia it's actually a lot of climbing here, and it takes forever to go see one spot because everything is like up and down. It takes a lot of energy, but it's cool. They have like many fortresses here and many mountains. So right now I'm at the citadel of Gori, and this is actually the highest point in the city. It's built in the 13th century, but some archaeological evidence points towards even BC, and you have lots of views here from all the mountains surrounding Gori, and also the snowy peaks that you can see on one side that I believe are towards the north. And I think it's a really nice place. You have all the Georgian flags and all the grass here, and it's really peaceful and nice.
From the citadel, I made my way down and spotted a small art gallery. Here I talked to the girl running it. It was a former public toilet, where one half was converted into an art hall for local young artists. The other half was used for community gatherings. I bought my first photo book here, showing photos of the locals in Gori during the Soviet times. The sun was starting to set and I visited the local market. The place was closing down, so I bought some water and found a lookout spot over the river as it was quite late in the day. If only the locals would treat the river better, as one man was throwing in his trash. It was quite shocking to see the people of the market not take better care of their nature. Especially since where I've grown up there's no scenery, so anybody that has this access to nature should count themselves lucky. I can also only imagine how much more busy this market had been had I dropped in during the morning. Across the river on the other side of town, there is the best rated restaurant of Gori. The name is Ke and Ra, which are the first letters of the owner's children. The owner was incredibly welcoming, hosting this makeshift restaurant in his garage. However, he charged an extraordinary amount for the food I was eating. For Georgian standards, as he said, he only allows tourists to eat there, regardless of the fact that the bill came to 128 lari or 40 euros for rural Georgia. It was the freshest eggplant dish I'd ever tasted, together with beautifully roasted potatoes. Cracking chestnuts was also very fun, and our host Georgie also roasted some apples in this old school stove. Everything was homemade by the host or his family working in the kitchen of the house. I also ordered a glass of Georgian wine and was offered a free shot of a Georgian spirit called cha-cha. Both were incredibly nice and homemade. However, for the price of 40 euros, I'm very reluctant to immediately recommend the place, especially since the apples came about 3 euros a piece, and 40 euros is quite a high charge for rural Georgia for two people, which was really kind of crazy. From this point, I took a quick Bolt taxi back to the train station. It took a little bit of effort, but I managed to buy one of the last few seats on the train to go back to Tbilisi.
Okay, so now I'm just waiting to take the train back to Tbilisi. It was kind of a mess at the ticket office because the first lady was really rude and just didn't even want to type Russian into my phone. And the second lady, thankfully, was really nice. And she spoke some Russian and some Italian, so I could figure it out with the combination of the two. I'm basically in this really abandoned train station. But there is supposed to be a train in about 20 minutes. I think it should be like one of those old Soviet trains. And yeah, this is kind of crazy. It's just like completely abandoned. It feels like that.
I'd hoped to get on board of a classic old Soviet train on the way back. However, the trains in recent years have had quite some modern updates, unfortunately. I arrived back at the Dubai station, for which I'd taken a car, and finished this day trip to the birthplace of one of the most feared leaders of history.